Way of Kings, Chapter 10, Stories of Surgeons. No quote to go on the beginning of this one because we are having a flashback. It's 9 years ago, and I mentioned in the previous chapter that Kaladin's dad Lirin was going to be important soon, and here he is. We are 9 years in the past, in Kaladin's youth. Sure enough, our suspicions are confirmed. Kaladin's dad is in fact some sort of surgeon, and Kaladin some sort of surgeon's apprentice stroke helping hand, so he's been learning medical stuff from his dad, and in fact he's seen as a bit odd locally, because he spends so much of his time reading and spending time with the sick and infirm. He's shunned because of it, and he starts to wonder, is that because, as a family, our survival depends on other people's suffering and misfortune? They live in a town called Hearthstone, which is a pretty big town, but it's very remote. They don't have a lot of connection with the outside world over there. We hear another of Lirin's little platitudes that he seems to live by. Lirin is either someone who's a simple person but who lives by strong morals, or he's someone who likes to say little catchy phrases that have to do with morals, like that thing in the previous chapter about there's two kinds of people in the world, those who take lives and those who save lives, or whatever it was. Well, here we hear another one of his. He thinks that you can tell a lot about a man from how he keeps his workspace sloppy or tidy, and Lirin's is very, very tidy. Pretty much all he's got is he's got this clock that's the only fabrial clock in, what, the whole town? Where? Yes, in the whole town, the only fabrial clock, which is to say, you know, a clock driven by magic as opposed to, I guess, clockwork, I don't know. Unless it actually means it's the only clock in the town, because it does say that, like, Lirin's the only one who really cares about keeping time. You'd think that a town would have figured out, you know, getting people to work at certain times is useful and things, but maybe not. We get a bit of superstition here. Instead of knowing that sort of, you know, germs are what carry disease, they think of deathspren and rotspren as being what carry disease, and well, in this world perhaps that is what it is, but either way they hate water, and so washing your hands is good practice for a surgeon. And that's cool, because it was quite late into the history of medicine that we figured out how important washing our hands actually is. It was sort of the invention of the wheel of medicine when we figured out to wash our hands, and everything changed after that, and it was surprisingly recently. Here we have a culture who have superstitious ancient reasons to have already figured it out. We find out a bit about their belief in the heralds. The heralds, says Lirin, were wise beyond our understanding, and Kaladin, who likes in these days to be known as Cal, says, but they're demons, father. I heard it off that Ardent who came teaching last spring. That's the Radiants he spoke of. You're mixing them up again. Okay, so you've got the Radiants, bad, and you've got the heralds, wise. The heralds were sent to teach mankind. They led us against the Voidbringers after we were cast from heaven. The Radiants were the order of knights they founded. Okay, so you got the heralds who apparently fought all of the Voidbringers, and then they left some knights behind, presumably when they left in the prologue bit that we read, where they decided to basically go and leave one of them behind. Perhaps they also left behind an order of knights who turned out to be super horrible bad guys. Great, good work. Who weren't demons, Lirin assures us. They were just men who had too much power and not enough sense, and they betrayed us. They're operating on this girl called Sani. We don't find out yet what actually happened, but she's got an injured hand. We find out that Kaladin, or rather Little Cal, used to be queasy around the sort of injuries that they would see in the surgery, but not anymore. He's got used to it, and that's gonna serve him well when he gets to be a soldier. See, we figured out in the previous chapter the idolized soldiers, didn't we? And it looks like it's something he wants to be. And of course we find out he does get to be one, and then he gets to be a slave. He wants to fight for his High Prince and the Light Eyes. And it was a bit earlier about Light Eyes and Dark Eyes and so on. He wants to be called Cal because it sounds more like a Dark Eyes name. Kaladin sounds like a Light Eyes name, and it makes him fit in better if he's called Cal. Lirin notices that he is a little bit nervous in some way and says to him that he needs to figure out how to kind of deal with that, because caring too much can be a problem. That's not exactly what Lirin says. He says, caring, like anything else, can be a problem if it interferes with your ability to perform surgery. Cal just hears, caring too much is bad, and goes, what? That's not bad, I'm a teenager, huff puff, huff puff, huff. Well, Cal is a bit late for this surgery, and it turns out the reason why is that he'd taken Tien, so Tien is still alive at this point, down to see someone called Jam. And I quote, Jam. Who's 2 years older than Kaladin and so probably doesn't want to hang out with him, but he has been training in the quarterstaff, and Kaladin really wants to see what that's all about, so he's gone over there with Tien, and they've watched him sort of, I don't know, twirl it around and so on probably. And here we hear the name Amaram again, this time chronologically earlier than any other time we've heard his name. And at this point, the younger Kaladin, or Cal, is completely obsessed with the guy. He thinks of Amaram as this kindly, noble, amazing overseer of the whole land, who is much better than stuffy old Wisty Owl. stuffy old Wistiow. Who's Wistiow? Do we know? I don't think we do. We'll find out later. And they have a little bit of an argument back and forth about the worth of, soldiers. Jam's father fought in Amram's army. He was a soldier in that, and I think that's really cool. Yes, I know he was a soldier. Because he was a soldier, he kept having to come to me with injuries all over him, and I had to fix them because being a soldier is a horrible thing. We need them! What if all those dirty foreigners started trying to come in? They're not dirty, they're just a little bit swindly from time to time, and the reason they come here is for trade. What's wrong with that? Lirin says something interesting here. King Gavilar, and that's the assassinated king, so he's still alive at this point, always finds people for us to fight. That much is true. So Lirin here is critical of the wars that these people are involved in, even before the Vengeance Pact, even before the assassination of the king. What we don't know is if the stuff with the chrysalises and the gems in their hearts and the bridge crews and all of that is going on at this point. We assume, because it's pre-Vengeance Pact, that it probably isn't. And then there's this moment where Lirin looks at him and says, there are two kinds of people in this world, son. And when I first read this chapter, I was critical of that. I thought that it seemed a bit quick to say, Kaladin's father used to say, there are two types of people in this world, son, and then almost cut to him going, there are two types of people in this world, son. That seemed a little bit close, because it's 3 or 4 pages separate, but I think I see what he's doing here. I think he's using that phrase to tie us here in with the previous. Basically, he's doing everything he can to make us absolutely, completely sure-footed within the story. Here is the flashback to the time when Lirin used to say this, having just heard that, now, in the sort of, present day in the story, Kaladin's reflections on the time when he used to say that. I think it is a bit on the nose that he says it right here, right in front of the camera, but, whatever. And Kaladin shoots back right to his face. But there's a third type of people, the people who save lives by taking lives, and we realise that whereas Kaladin's sort of memory of it or opinion of it now in the present is that he used to think this thing and now he's thought of an alternative. Actually, we find out that Lirin shot down the whole thing straight away. He says that's like trying to stop a storm by blowing harder. Ridiculous. You can't protect by killing. And finally, as Lirin is quizzing Kaladin, sorry, I should say Cal, because Cal, the change in name is used to differentiate the times when we're looking at Kaladin and when we're looking at Cal. You can think of them as two separate people, Cal before and Kaladin after. So Kaladin's being quizzed.
Cal is being quizzed. Come on, Dave, you just said it.
On various surgery knowledge, which is how, in an earlier chapter, when he was looking at the injured people, he was like, well, we should apply this and we should do that because he knows the surgery stuff. Here's where he got it from. During this, Lirin tells him that he's been saving up to send him, Kaladin, Cal, to Kharbranth to be trained up as an actual surgeon with real surgeons, and you get the sense that this is something that people of their station can't usually afford. And sure enough, Lirin tells him that our grandfathers bought and worked us to the second Narn so that we could have full citizenship and the right of travel. Don't waste that on killing. So yeah, this is a family that's sort of a relatively low social status. It's teetering on the brink of going even lower. They haven't got much money. Actually, it says that what they do have is a load of gemstones on permanent loan from the local lord or something. Hang on. An incredible sum of bromes on permanent loan from Hearthstone's landlord, Hearthstone being the town where they live. So permanent loan seems to suggest that you can have it forever, but you can't spend it. Either that or they're not spending it. And they're not. They're using it for lighting. It lights Lirin's surgery because lamps and candlelight and things like that are sort of flickery and can go wrong, whereas apparently Stormlight is absolutely steady, which of course is good news if you're trying to do surgery under it. But you get the suspicion that when Lirin says he wants to send him off to train expensively in an expensive place with expensive people, he might be about to find himself with a slightly less well-lit surgery, and maybe Kaladin isn't going to get to find out about that. So here we have Lirin. He's a good, strong, moral guy, he's a good surgeon, he likes to help people, good head on his shoulders, and a lot of little moral phrases and sayings by which to live. So nice little flashback chapter there, only a brief one, but we've learned a lot. We've learned about Lirin's character, we've learned a bit about Kaladin's past, we've learned a bit about the Vorin religion. Is it the Vorin religion, the stuff about the heralds and so on? You got the heralds who were wise, and they set up some knights, and those knights betrayed everyone by being greedy and, clutching at too much power and things like that, and they were called the Radiants. Oof. The Radiants. They sound like they thought highly of themselves, don't they? The Radiants. However, a lot of people, not just, one local person that Kaladin meets, it does say, as many insist. So a lot of people think that they were demons. So, imagine a whole troop of armoured Judases. But then we also hear that Lirin doesn't think the Voidbringers actually existed. So, not sure who he thinks the heralds led them all against, but something. A couple of background characters we hear about. Hammy is some kid, he's one of Cal's friends, who influences Cal to doubt his father's belief in the herald's wisdom. Hesina is the name of Kaladin's mum. Vaith is a very old person who taught Lirin his trade. The Voidbringers are blamed when things went missing in the night or when a crop got infected with digger worms, so they're a sort of go-to general devil stroke nasty fairy type thing. Here there's a town called Schorschbrunn, which is the nearest town of any decent size to wherever it is that Lirin and Kaladin live. Well, actually we know where they live. They live in Hearthstone. And we hear about fiddlepox, which is a bad thing to get. It causes nervous energy, thirst, trouble sleeping, and swelling on the undersides of the arms. And we hear about winterwort, which is basically a sort of anaesthetic. And Thalanar, where the Thalans live, I think, are they the people with the eyebrows? They come from Thalanar, which is an island kingdom somewhere near to where Kaladin grew up, but they don't share a border, they're sort of over the water. There you go, I think that's everything worth talking about in this chapter, so let's reconvene for the next chapter, which is chapter 11, Droplets. Alright then, bye-bye!